If you were on the internet from the mid 2010s, you've probably heard of FNAF. In its prime, it was very popular, with animations to let's plays to songs. I mean, I've seen people argue that FNAF basically invented the indie music genre. I remember I was a kid growing up in 2015. I'm 18 now, turning 19. And remember desperately wanting to play FNAF to the point I pirated the games, which by the way I don't condone, and then would watch Smike's fact videos on YouTube. I remember during the era, that time we barely had any characters besides the guards, the phone guy, and of course the mysterious purple guy, who's currently not so mysterious now. I mean, we may as well know the dude's social security number at this point. I remember getting into the franchise when FNAF 1, 2, and 3 were still out, and of course FNAF 4 teaser trailers. With those eerie images of what we now know as the Nightmare animatronics, and the hype for the final game of the franchise. Then we got FNAF World, then Sister Location, then Pizzeria Simulator, which was supposed to be the actual finale, but then we got Ultimate Custom Night, which was the epilogue, where the purple guy, who we now know as William Afton, was in hell, and that was it. Until we got Hell Wanted, where somehow Afton returned, but as an AI. Not the real one. Then we got Security Breach after Afton returned again, but for real this time. But then we got the DLC. It was never Afton. Afton died in FNAF 6. Glitch Trap is actually the mimic. In case you couldn't tell what the issue here is, it never ends, and the lore just keeps getting crazy. FNAF 1 2 3 was about a rogue employee, potentially a rogue employee, killing 5 children and those kids haunting the animatronics, and eventually getting their revenge and going free. Then by the time FNAF 6 came out, the story came convoluted. We got Remnant, which is basically the reason the kids haunt the animatronics, and it works as some form of liquid, considering it's implied that you can inject it out of the animatronic and inject it into other animatronics, which it's a whole thing. Purple guy is William Afton, and instead of being some nobodies, he is actually one of the founders of the restaurants, and killed those kids because he wanted to obtain immortality. Him being spring-locked in FNAF 3, which was clearly meant to be his eternal damnation and karma. Yeah, despite him not liking it in FNAF 3 and trying to take the suit off, he comes around to it in FNAF 6 and actually enjoys being immortal. Well, that is what the story apparently is. What people don't understand is, and what I don't see being talked about, is that until debatably Sister Location, FNAF 6, or even Security Breach, 90% of FNAF's story is just theories that the fanbase universally agrees on, and as such constantly changes. Scott never wrote a story, he just left ambiguous clues on who the characters are and what their personality is. I mean, like, remove all the fan theories and clues left in the games for a second. What is the story of FNAF? Actually, scratch that. Tell me, what's the personality of the purple guy? What's the personality of Michael Afton? We only have limited lines to go off of here. And as such, I bet most of you would say, you don't know, which is exactly what the problem with FNAF is for me. The amount of story changes and the lore changes, how there's not even a real story. Let me give you a major problems I've had with the lore. Like with FNAF 1 to 4, I like the story these 4 games told. Some guy in a yellow suit murders 5 kids, and then later on, karma gets to him, and he dies in a spring-lock suit, eternally damned to suffer the same fate as the kids he brutally murdered, who are now free, and him potentially surviving? Well, I always saw him as him being stuck in Fazbear Frights, and suffering that suit for all of eternity. You know, one of the few ramifications of immortality. Then there's FNAF 4, which makes for a good prequel and gives you an answer to who did the bite of 87. Or 83, a question nobody asked, but Scott loves making his stories fucking overcomplicated for no apparent reason. Sure, it isn't much of a story, but it does add to the lore and makes the games more satisfying to play. FNAF Sister Location to FNAF 6. This is where the story takes a 180 twice. At first we thought Sister Location was the origins of the purple guy. He's actually a tragic character being controlled by some evil robot named Enid, which implies later on he's a robot with a human inside of him, with a robot inside of him, and makes him a sad uwu villain, which I'm glad Scott retconned, because I like the whole sadistic dude formula that was sort of implied in the first 4 games. And then when the custom night comes up, we actually learn, no, purple guy is still a pure evil douchebag, and there's another purple guy who's actually his son, and he's Springtrap. Wait, no, he's not actually Springtrap. It's actually the evil purple guy, who's actually the other purple guy's father. Yeah, this means the fanbase did a full 360 on how they viewed the purple guy. The evil purple guy is actually named William Afton, and he owned the FNAF restaurants alongside the guy named Henry, who is the father of the puppet, and then proceeded to kill 5 children because he was grieving or wanted immortality, depending on how you interpreted it. He also has 3 children, 2 of them die, one of them becomes the good purple guy. He wanted to harvest Remnant, and Remnant is basically again the spirit energy that makes the animatronic move and stuff. Henry and Michael team up and decide to burn the purple guy who got Springlock, but that didn't work. So they tried again, and it worked, and he went to hell until it didn't. Because in Hell Wanted security breach, Afton comes back as an AI and brainwashes this one girl into becoming a rabbit-suited killer, like him. Oh yeah, the yellow suit. Yeah, at first we thought it was Golden Freddy, but then it was confirmed to be a Spring Bonnie, aka the suit that became Springtrap. That's besides the point. To set her up as the new villain of the franchise, only for the next game where she does nothing but chases you around, gets killed in one of the ending, and the supposed canon ending, she was nothing but a pawn to bring back the actual Afton, who is now a joke. He doesn't even attack you directly, and you have a boss fight with him till he gets killed again, making Michael and Henry's sacrifice useless, because not only did Afton survives, he comes back just to die again, which makes you think, what was the point? But wait, no. Scott and Steelwool, who are the new developers, realized this was a huge writing blunder and retconned it. Glitchtrap isn't Afton, nor is Buntrap. It's actually some bot named the Mimic, who's actually the real new antagonist of the games. Because of course, they realized milking Afton for the 900th time is not gonna work. So he's back in hell with Golden Freddy. Oh, Golden Freddy has 2 souls possessing him, one of them trapping the evil purple guy in hell. And then after that, well, I can't tell you. I stopped keeping track of the lore shortly after because this was a huge blunder, and back in 2020 and 2021, I was often critical of how Scott just kept milking the lore, but by this point it was at its worst and I just quit the franchise. I'm not sure about the Mimic other than it ruined the streak of good FNAF songs, but that's not what the video is about. The point I'm making is, Scott isn't a good writer, and the story of FNAF, or lack thereof, considering again most of it is just universally agreed upon fan theories, which is constantly retconned and changed. No good story in fiction, by the way, has to be this vague and retconned and changed constantly. A lot of it is Scott's fault because 1, he never gives straight answers, and 2, he keeps on making new mysteries for the sake of new mysteries, to the point he's forced to make another game which vaguely clarifies any misunderstandings of the last ones. Take FNAF 4, for example. It would have been a good finale for the franchise, but Scott, being Scott, decided to add extra mysteries in there because FNAF needs secrets, even though at the time the franchise itself was already pretty big. We didn't have any real characters. For example, we could have finally gotten an answer to the Bite of 87, which was one of the biggest mysteries of the franchise at the time. But nope, Scott had made it the Bite of 83, and who did the Bite of 87? We still don't know. Only difference is that we have bigger questions to answer, so we just agreed it was Mangle and called it a day. Or the box that Scott introduced in the game, which also still hasn't been answered. The point is, Scott wrote himself into a corner, so he had to make another game. But Sister Location again had so many misconceptions that he had to clarify it in a DLC. And even the DLC was misunderstood, that Scott had to verbally confirm that Michael, the good purple guy, is not Springtrap. Then he wrote FNAF 6 to tie up some of the loose ends, like Springtrap surviving the fire in FNAF 3, which was confirmed in the DLC, and a heroic sacrifice by Michael and Henry, only for it to be made meaningless by the next two entries, and it had to be retcon. There's also the fact that the franchise is so milked, and honestly, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but the franchise has grown a lot and it makes Scott money and he has mods to feed. But at the very least, he could not try ending the story multiple times only to backpedal and make the endings of the previous games meaningless. How many times have the children Afton killed have been freed? Twice now. Now, the ending of FNAF 3 seems weird because the good ending isn't that good of an ending because due to Remnant, the rest of the kids still being trapped inside Ennard and Molden Freddy, which by the way, Afton apparently took the remnant of the original five children and just injected it inside the Funtime animatronics. Him ending it wouldn't be so bad if he tried taking the series into a new directions, but it didn't. After FNAF 6, Afton was genuinely gonna come back as an AI, and it took until harsh criticism for that to be retconned out of existence. And that point, FNAF shouldn't even end. It should just keep going, and because that's better than giving us a good ending, only to nullify it and make it meaningless in the next entry. It's like Scott and the new writers at Steel will make the worst decisions when it comes to the lore, and he keeps on making the old stories rather than do something new with the franchise and evolve out of the Afton saga. Remember, this is a franchise about evil animatronics trying to kill you. There's so much you could do for a new story. Like considering the fact that rogue AIs exist in the series with the Mimic. A sentient AI going rogue would make for a good new storyline. Or considering the fact ghosts in the afterlife is implied to exist, you could have demons controlling the animatronics, which isn't as crazy as the actual lore is. Point is, the franchise itself is milked, and I don't mean that it shouldn't continue. No, it's that it continues in the worst way possible. Many times we are told that the story will end only for the original story to continue, and make the previous ending meaningless. Many times the lore is confusing for the sake of being confusing, and there isn't a good story because again, Scott never wrote a proper story. It's just the fanbase did and Scott went along with it. There's other medias like the books, which again warrants its own video, and the movies that make it clear without the fanbase making a narrative for him. The story is just rather lackluster at best. Take a look at the FNAF movie. It's a decent FNAF movie, but a horrible horror movie. The pillow fort scene alone, it seems like something you'd see in a 2015 FNAF SFM video, not an official movie. Then there's the games. They're not even that scary anymore. FNAF 1, amazing, revolutionized the horror and indie genre and brought something new. FNAF 2, an amazing sequel prequel, more stressful, challenging, but if you get the strategy right, you could beat the game with ease. FNAF 3, probably the weakest of the three, but and it is my personal favorite. I think it's more of a psychological horror. There's something about being haunted by the actual killer who's damned to the same fate as his victims hunting you down, and the fact that he's the only genuine threat you have to face, like a final boss of sorts. Then there's FNAF 4, that brought something genuinely new to the franchise, adding in a new gameplay style while staying true to the franchise with new horrific designs we hadn't seen before. Then Sister Location came out. It was more story driven and horror driven, and unlike the first four games, there is no real replay value to it. The first four games were, the story was just an addition to it for die-hard fans to figure out, while casual players can just enjoy the horror of the game. In Sister Location, the story was the forefront, and after you complete it, there's not much of an incentive to play it again. Not that you can't, but I see myself come back less to this game. As for the DLC, it's just your classic FNAF formula. Then came FNAF 6, a pretty solid and actually kind of scary game. Once you get the hang of it, and then UCN came out, and it's less scary, more challenging. Help Wanted was much more cool to me than scary because it's VR. Then finally Security Breach, which didn't even feel like horror. The jump scares were so lame that even Markiplier, who's known for overreacting to jump scare, wasn't scared by them. And also, I'm also not a fan of the free roam aspect. The thing that made FNAF scary and revolutionary back in 2014 is that it wasn't a first person free roam game like the others, like Slender and the 8 pages, but rather a game where you were trying to stop the monsters getting to you, than trying to escape it. So it didn't felt like a FNAF game to me at all. Also, one of the reasons I lost interest in the franchise was that FNAF doesn't feel like FNAF anymore. Anyways, this is the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, this insane rambling of mine, and I know it seems negative, but I will make another FNAF video in the future, maybe one where it's less negative and where I praise the franchise. I'm also thinking of doing a series where I go over each game and what the lore for that game is, and of course what the timeline for FNAF would have been around that time period. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys in the next one.